Jujutsu Kaisen is slowly becoming one of my favourite mangas slash animes, and there's a couple of reasons why. The power system and fights are brilliant, there's stakes involved as every character including the MC, Yuji Itadori are on the chopping block, and finally the characters are incredibly compelling. My favourite character for this very reason is Ryumin Sukuna. I know, it's blasphemy, it should be Gojo, but he's gonna have to take second place for me. And the reason why I love Sukuna is due to his complex simplicity. At face value, he seems like he is pure evil, a calamity that eats when he wants to eat, kills when he wants to kill, and someone that throws something a bone if he finds it interesting. However, as we've seen later on in the manga and recently within the anime, there's a method to the madness. Sukuna's philosophy and view on the world is actually quite interesting, and it ties into the core themes of JJK. In this video, I'm going to specifically analyse his philosophy using 2 episodes of the anime, that being Thunderclap Part 1 and 2, so there'll be no major spoilers for anything that happens past these episodes for anime onlys. So yes, this will be a mini breakdown of those 2 episodes as well. I hope you guys enjoy. Before we get started, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll get straight into it. Thunderclap Part 1 starts off with Megami and Asterix fighting Toji, which at this point he currently has no knowledge of who Toji is. Interestingly, Megami senses Sukuna's presence before the fight starts, which does indicate that at 15 fingers his power is overwhelming. The fight ends when Toji realizes that he's fighting his own son and subsequently takes his own life. While Megami's making his way back to Jujutsu High, he gets attacked by Haruta, which sets up the events that will occur in Thunderclap Part 2. Meanwhile, we cut back to Sukuna, who's absolutely bullying Jogo. I really feel bad for him, I'm not gonna lie. This even leads to Jogo remembering his conversation with Geto, as he informs Jogo that he's around 8 to 9 fingers of Sukuna's power, which as we see now was either a lie, or each finger that Yuji eats gives Sukuna an exponential amount of cursed energy. Jogo is clearly presented to be going all out, while Sukuna is presented in a way that shows he's just having fun, which we see through his theatrics and his demeanour. He even tells Jogo that he's essentially just playing with him, and he'll do so until he gets bored. A couple of streets away, Kusakabe, Panda and 2 members of Geto's family start to notice that Sukuna and Jogo are fighting. Kusakabe describes it as elephants tap dancing on ants, which clearly paints out the power difference between special grade sorcerers and curses compared to the rest of the verse. In a last ditch attempt to hit Sukuna, Jogo uses his maximum meteor technique, which Kusakabe and Panda attempt to run from as the radius of the attack is massive and of course would do serious damage. However, before they even get anywhere, Sukuna appears in between all of the curse users and forbids them from moving until he says they can, otherwise he'll kill them. This scene right here is a perfect example of how Sukuna views the rest of humanity and civilization as a whole. Shibuya to him is just a playground in which he can test his strength against others that are willing to entertain him. Moreover, he clearly views himself above humanity, or at the very least most people in Shibuya at this point, which is why he doesn't hesitate in causing potential harm and property damage. After a few seconds, he tells the curse users they can run, and the maximum meteor lands, which Jogo seems confident that he at least hit Sukuna with it. Unfortunately for him, he was wrong, and Sukuna asks him why he didn't decide to use his domain. Now here's where it gets interesting. Jogo states that he'd lose in a clash of domains with Sukuna, which Sukuna calls back to what happened when he fought Gojo and then calls him a loser. This is actually a great callback to earlier on in the season when Gojo calls Jogo a loser for using hostages to limit Gojo's ability to fight the cursed spirits. Self-belief is a major theme in JJK and is tied directly to the power system as it determines the potential of cursed users. At the start of the episode, this is also shown with Megami as he uses Rabbit Escape to flee from Toji rather than fighting him, which shows us clearly why his 10 Shadows technique has not been fully mastered, as he doesn't have a strong sense of self-confidence, which again we will be seeing in Thunderclap Part 2. Sukuna then challenges Gojo to a contest of fire, which should give Jogo the advantage as it's his own element, but as we see a few seconds later, it doesn't end well for him. In what we as the audience can only assume is the afterlife, Jogo speaks to Hanami and Dagon and reiterates his belief that cursed spirits are the true humans. Sukuna overhears this while in this afterlife space and understands that Jogo wanted cursed spirits to overthrow the position of humans in the hierarchy. He then goes on to say one of the most important lines in JJK up until now.
Even though I understand it, it's so foolish. Packs of humans, packs of curses. All of you get together and measure your worth against each other, driving all of you to grow weaker and stunted. You really should have just burnt everything down to a cinder without giving it a thought. Casting aside race, future, everything until you finally reached Satoru Gojo.
That line is incredibly important for the story, and it even has real world truth to it. For the story, what Sukuna is telling Jogo is that he shouldn't have cared whether or not he was a cursed spirit or human, and should have just did what he wanted. Rather than create a group of cursed spirits to be around to overtake humanity, he should have just done it himself, as it would have made him stronger. By comparing himself to his fellow cursed spirits, as well as top level sorcerers such as Gojo, he inadvertently stunted his own growth, as he could never view himself as the strongest when put against the likes of Mahito and Gojo, which also stunted his will to get stronger as he's placed himself in a power hierarchy. This is why Sukuna says to him he should have burnt everything down to reach the heights of Satoru Gojo, as Sukuna understands what it takes to get to Gojo's level of power. In the anime, we
I fought humans, sorcerers, and cursed spirits 1,000 years ago, and you were still one of the better ones I fought. Stand proud. You are strong.
A mindset like this is something that can easily be applied to real life, which is why I find this explanation so interesting. Many people go through life constantly comparing themselves to others and constantly believing that they need groups in order to make a change or achieve something great. Now, I'm not saying that you should be a loner or you shouldn't ever make comparisons to other people, but what I am saying is that a lot of people stunt their growth through these means. An easy example for this in my own case is content creation. If I constantly compared my channel to others or constantly looked for other channels to group up with for the sake of it, and not for the improvement of the content as a whole, then I'd probably not have broken 100 subscribers or even 1,000 views on a video. A more general example would be in a simple friendship group. If you're constantly comparing yourself to someone else within the group, or you need a decent amount of people to experience something with you when you could do it with one other person or by yourself, you are probably stunting your own growth as a person. Now, burning everything to a cinder is something you could apply to competitive fields such as athletes. Most athletes know each other and are friends with each other in major sports, but they each understand that when competing, they can't let those personal feelings stop them from winning. This is something I think a lot of people are afraid to do in many situations, as they don't want to step on people's toes, but in order to grow and reach your ideals and your goals, you're going to have to step on people's toes. That doesn't mean you should screw someone over for no reason, but if you and a coworker are both competing for a promotion, you need to, for a lack of better wording, stand on business and secure that promotion, knowing that could affect your coworker in different ways. Ultimately, that is selfish, but as we know from JJK, being selfish is what leads to unlocked potential, and sometimes you have to make that sacrifice in order to achieve your ideals. Speaking of JJK, Thunderclap Part 1 ends with Sukuna looking over Jogo's charred body, and Uraume greeting Sukuna, which he seems surprisingly excited about. Now that I've examined that specific conversation, I'm going to break down Thunderclap Part 2, mainly because this episode is also brilliant. But the reason why this episode is so great is more so for its imagery. It starts with a bright scene of Yuji's grandfather telling Yuji that he's strong and should help others. This immediately cuts back to Sukuna and the scenery of Shibuya, which shows their contrast in character. It cut back to Megami explaining his 10 Shadows technique as he gets ready to summon the Divine General, Maharaga. A flashback plays in which Gojo explains to Megami that in the past, the Gojo clan head with the Limitless and Six Eyes technique and the Zenin clan head with the 10 Shadows technique killed each other when a sparring match became serious, which again shows Megami's potential. Characters such as Gojo and Sukuna see that power and they see that as a gift, but Megami seems to only use it as a crutch, or more accurate, a suicide move. It makes sense as it's also explained that no one in history has managed to tame Maharaga, but this further alludes to Megami's lack of self-confidence. Sukuna senses this rise in power and leaves Uraume to sort out his quote-unquote preparations, and right after that, Megami gets absolutely clapped by Maharaga. The use of sound here with the music and Maharaga's footsteps really sets the tone for the level of power this character has, which can only compare to the likes of the strongest. Sukuna comes in and saves Haruta with the influence from his curse technique and Sukuna's own deduction for the rules of the ritual, and he proceeds to heal Megami, and which again alludes to his future plans. The fight ensues between Sukuna and Maharaga, and there's a few main points I want to bring up. The first one is Sukuna's level of deduction when it comes to his understanding of battle and curse techniques, and it's shown off brilliantly here. He figures out what the Sword of Extermination is, he figures out Maharaga's adaptation, and he even compares him to Yamato no Orochi, implying he's fought similar beasts to Maharaga before. Both Maharaga and Sukuna seemingly enjoy this fight, due to the level of excitement that comes from the both of them. Also, the imagery is brilliant during this fight. There's a specific scene where Sukuna uses this mantle on top of a traffic light, and the whole scene is like a mirror, so once he uses it, the whole scene shatters, revealing the destruction being caused in the city. This, alongside Sukuna's use of theatrics, such as bowing and hand gestures, would again suggest that Shibuya is just his playground. What makes this even more worrying for the characters in verse and us as viewers is that this is only 75% of his power. Near the end of the fight, it becomes very artistic with the whole scene becoming red while Sukuna uses his malevolent kitchen. I meant malevolent shrine, which absolutely deletes everything, including the women and the children in the surrounding area. Rather than the music sounding sad, however, it sounds very ritualistic and divine, which would connote Sukuna's divinity or self-imposed divinity over mankind. Maharaga walks through this attack like it's nothing, but like the nuke that Sukuna is described as, he pulls out his fire arrow and completely destroys Maharaga, along with the surrounding area in a blaze of glory. Haruta's technique couldn't save him from destruction, nor could Yuji's own lack of involvement, as the only thing he could do was cry as the opening theme played. The use of music here was a little bit strange, but I think the reason why it was used was to contrast the amount of life in the opening with the lack of life in Shibuya at that moment. The episode ends with Yuji traumatized and Nanami attempting to look after his students even though he's on death's door. To conclude, both of these episodes are absolutely brilliant in their own ways and shows us a lot about the characters within the series without being too obvious about it. Sukuna is the star of the show for these two episodes as we see his entire philosophy out in the open, which actually goes hand in hand with the themes of JJK with the pursuit of power and selfishness that comes with being a strong sorcerer. He's an evil character when judging him from his cover, but his philosophy is something that has been used by good characters in the show, such as Gojo during his awakening, and is also used by people we admire in the real world, such as athletes when they go on to win championships. I think the bigger question is how far are people willing to go for power, rather than is being selfish a bad thing to gain, which again is the contrast between many sorcerers, including Gojo, and on the opposite side Sukuna, who seems to do anything for power and only respects power, which we see by the way he speaks to Jogo in the afterlife. Okay, so this has been my first video essay that I finished to completion, so I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm not gonna lie to you, while I was writing the script, I really did think it was gonna be a lot longer of a video, but unfortunately it wasn't. But that should be rectified with more video essays coming in the future. Make sure to share your thoughts down below. Just make sure to keep it respectful as I'm trying to grow a community of people that are able to look in depth in pieces of media and aren't afraid to share their opinions. Also make sure to leave a like and subscribe as that will help the channel out a ton, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care and have a brilliant rest of your day.